guys, welcome to this next instalment of With Bass in Mind in conversation with. I'm excited about today. I'll tell you why I'm excited about today, because I've got one of my best friends in the bass industry on the line, and here he is, this beautiful, handsome chap, Snow. Good afternoon, buddy. How you doing?
Good afternoon. How you doing, bro?
You're like everyone. Straight away, a minute ago, you was giggling away like a schoolboy, and now all of a sudden I do the intros and you go, "Oh, good morning, bro. How are you?" All of a sudden get all calm and collected so that it's all looking professional.
Game fit.
Guys, Snow Owl, he is an absolute force of nature. I absolutely love this boy and I love his music. There's been some great standout things. His work with Hans Zimmer has always been a massive inspiration. We're going to get stuck into that today quite a little bit. But also, what caught my ear a little while ago was Hush, which was this great animation thing that Snow did, layering multi-tracks of bass on top of one another to get this wonderful, wonderful picture, sort of a sonic picture of the instrument. So what we're going to do today is we're going to chat to Snow about what he's been up to, because this gentleman is now a Hollywood Music and Media Awards winner. So can we just start off straight away with a massive congratulations. This was for the Dune trailer with Hans Zimmer, which was a cover of Eclipse, which was the Water of Waters tune. So congrats, mate. Wonderful achievement, buddy. Really great.
So much. Thank you. It's a wonderful thing that Hans put together as a tribute to the original Dune movie that they were trying to do in the 70s, where they were going to use Pink Floyd music.
Yeah.
So they wanted to bring that full circle. And that's the reason why we ended up choosing Eclipse. And because of the whole COVID situation, as everybody knows, it was a huge part of that session was my responsibility to lead that in Vienna with the timpanis, the tubular bells, the organ, Hammond organ, and a bunch of stuff, guitars and everything. And it was a lot of pressure to deliver that alone without Hans to lead the session and conduct the session. So we're very happy that the Synchron stage helped us out in bringing this to life.
Immediately, that's a role that some people might not actually realise that is so significant in your career. I know you, Music Radar. You were Bassist of the Year 2019, and we met when I did the review for the Phoenix bass. We'll talk about that when we get onto some equipment later on. I did that review for Bass Player magazine. But people know you as a bassist, but this is as literally a conductor taking sessions with huge orchestrations. Tell us about that role first of all. Is that something you've had training in? Is it something you naturally evolved into? How did that all come around?
Well, a lot of people might not know that about me, but I started with acoustic bass in high school as well, parallel to electric bass. And I've been working in orchestral music since literally I was in the Tampa Bay Symphony when I was 17 years old.
Wow.
And I was working with them and also Florida Orchestra. And so this orchestral life has been a part of my life forever. And I've always dabbled in learn each element of music as much as possible, because if I'm going to follow a conductor, which can be very hard sometimes because they all have their own style of showing the downbeat and everything, then I had to study what conducting is, just enough basics so that I can follow conductors. And it turned into just my love for Beethoven, my love for orchestral composition. It's just something I've always been doing on the side. And a lot of people don't realize that because they just see the electric bass side, but I've been involved in orchestral music forever.
The studio, all those sessions took place in Vienna. I'm assuming a lot of this was done remotely. I mean, that's something that's really evolved in the last year. Obviously, for most of us, the COVID world pandemic has been quite suppressive, but for a lot of us, we can count our blessings because, like yourself, I mean, we spoke about this just before we came on air. I've spent the last 2 decades on the road. I spend 6 hours in a van or a coach, then a couple of hours on stage, and then 6 hours through the night in coach again. So for a certain type of touring musician, time is actually the thing which we have the least of. People see, oh, he's got, I don't know, Snow Owl, bags of talent, he's handsome, look at him, he's a work of art. But he has no time because you're always being battered pillar from post to actually sit down and go, right, now I can give this product my full attention. That's a unique situation which has actually arose from the last 12 months, isn't it?
Yes. I think that I always think of the Tao of what you resist persists. And if you look at every situation, as adversity, and as if you feel like you're a victim, you're not going to learn anything. You're not going to grow at all. This is a blessing, this situation, as hard as it is. And I'm sorry for saying the word blessing when it's connected to so many people fighting this pandemic. But the amount of hours that we lose traveling, where I wish I would have had that time for practicing, for composing, for learning other instruments. I've been blessed with that time now. So I feel like we owe it to the audience and to our closest friends and to our musicians, family, to develop our best when we are given this time. So that when in any form of performance comes back, we're able to tell an even deeper tale thanks to that time.
That's nice, man. The other thing that's been wonderful about having that sort of time is also the sort of, I don't want to say the refining process. You said about a lot of these work, especially working with hands. That's something that really does make. I'm very interested. A massive fan of some of his scores and stuff like that. So it's great that. But if you're a working part, how's the communication work between you? If you're conducting and looking after one side of a session, how does those two minds meet in cyberspace? But how does the communication roll between you?
The technology helps tremendously. There's great softwares, Source Connect or different, where they can remotely even watch and hear the session in real time, which is fantastic. And sometimes even more pressure because you might have, directors of top studios watching you through that software in real time, what you're doing. And every move that you make either validates your reputation or it will ruin it. So you better be on top of your game if you have to deliver under such circumstances. But I'm a big believer, no pressure, no diamond. And the beauty of being in this situation, especially bringing up the COVID thing, is I love the fact of how humbling this whole COVID experience is, because you have to face yourself and you have to ask yourself, who are you? Who am I in this pandemic? Who am I when I don't have thousands of people watching me perform? That is such a beautiful point of reflection that we are all going through. And I'm sure in all different branches, people are facing themselves finally. And hopefully building up that true inner strength and inner confidence to be who they are. I don't know if that makes sense, but I think it's important. So in that moment, when remotely, they're watching you or giving you information or whatever, why do I bring this up? Because your sense of self, your confidence, all of that, who am I? That's the moment for you to show it. And even if you try to hide it, it'll come out.
There's been so many elements of my own personality that I think I've discovered in the last 12 months. I've always been a sideman. I don't think many people, other than people that are working bass players or in the industry, would even know who I am, or anything that I've worked with. I've always been the guy behind the person, in the shadows at the back. But like you say, that force, some people have it forced upon them, some people are born with it, that sort of thing. But I've, with bass in mind, wouldn't exist without the last 12 months, and with 2020, and it's pushed me in so many new directions that I wouldn't have had to evolve, to use technology-based resources that I wouldn't have done before. And I've grown more in the last 12 months than I have in the last decade, I think. I don't just mean because I'm staying at home and not exercising. I just mean actually as a career, so it's all good.
Well, I have to say something to that really quick, especially for your viewers who have the absolute privilege to receive your level of excitement and knowledge that you have about this instrument. And I have to just point it out, before we move on to another question, that when I watched you teach in the London-based guitar show, I went in the seminar room from Scott's, and you were giving an explanation, and it's so rare to see somebody, the excitement, the enthusiasm, but also the depth of knowledge and understanding, and the hardest part, the bridge to give that information to another human being who has completely different objective receivers, and the way that you're able to connect with them and pass on the information. It for me, Bass in Mind it's such a joy that it's here now, because people need to experience what you can offer.
Cheers, buddy. If I was with you, I'd give you a cuddle. I don't know what to say about that. Yeah, thank you. I do appreciate it. It means a lot to me. Just for the record, for anybody that's watching, I was terrified. I think that was the weekend that I met Juan. We started having a great relationship. We've been buddies ever since. And it actually is a nice link onto our next little subject. But I met you because I was doing a review of a very, very special bass guitar. When we first met, we was thrown together for me to do a review of a signature instrument that was released. And this will kind of nicely lend us into working in the studio and working live, and the different sort of stresses and requirements that has of you as an instrumentalist, also on your equipment. But the Phoenix, considering I've got my own little, there's my plug, my own little signature bass, I said it was the greatest bass guitar I'd ever played, and the greatest craftsmanship I'd ever experienced in the history of the instrument. Tell us about the Phoenix, because it has one hell of a story, doesn't it?
Yes. I don't want to take too much time from of course, but the short version is, and Andreas Neubauer built my first contrabass guitar, and at the time before we decided to build the Phoenix, he had a tough battle with cancer, and what I wanted to do when it looked that he was starting to get out of it, that's when I approached him, because it had been 10 years already, and he's such a close, dear friend of mine. And I said to him, why don't we build an anniversary bass together to mark our friendship, and also let's call it the Phoenix, like it's you rising out of the ashes of what you've just been through. And it was so gorgeous to see his transformation every day that we built that instrument together, and I was with him for most of the build. Every time the bass took more shape, he took more shape, and that's just such a perfect example of the joy of service, the joy of duty, and to do what you were meant to do, and how it lifts your spirit. And he survived, and the bass turned out to be just an exceptional craftsmanship, and it's been received worldwide tremendously. I don't know how many amazing compliments his instrument has gotten, especially from Hans, from recording studios, from audio engineers in arenas, in venues. Immediately they're struck by this incredible instrument that is not disrupting the whole frequency spectrum.
Yeah, it's spectacular. It's an absolute work of art. Being in a studio has a number of different requirements that are completely different to working live. But your live stage position, specifically with the Zimmer stuff, It's quite unique. A lot of the viewers, specifically from a bass guitar background, will be used to a small band. A drums, bass, guitar, vocals, maybe a horn section, some vocals, whereby you can work with a monitor, or maybe you'll work with a click or something like that on live. There's there's an awful lot more bodies on stage with hands, an massive soundscope, a huge sonic picture to deal with. If you don't mind, why don't you tell us a little bit about, first of all, let's talk about your live setup and how you've managed that, because obviously I remember when I started working in orchestras, I moved over to in-ears because of, it's such a horrible word to say, with so much talent, but because of noise pollution, I had to block it out. Tell us about your stage setup and how you've overcome some of those things working with such a grand orchestra.
The best professional compliment that you could ever get as an electric player, because you have an amplifier within an orchestra scenario, is that somebody asks you, could you put it louder? That's a very important thing. When the first challenge, when we started there, and this is one of the reasons why I decided to use the Aguilar rig that I have there. It's four 10s and a 15, what I'm using there. But there's certain frequencies, mid-range frequencies from the Aguilar amplifier that you're able to take away, so that I'm not sort of noise canceling or phase canceling out all the bowing from the cellos and the basses. So that's something that I checked out. That was the first challenge for me, is let's find out what is the main frequency that they're playing in, and I don't want to kill their attack on the bow. And fortunately, the Aguilar was very helpful in, and also the bass switch that I use from Rupert Instruments. There I was able to EQ everything precisely, that I'm not stepping on anybody. And I use a DI from Dark Glass, because I have an impulse response loaded on that as well. So it's two signals. You have the bass from the bass switch, Dark Glass with an impulse response, and the sound of the amplifier, the actual sound coming out from the speakers. There's so many microphones on the stage, so I don't have to have a microphone on the speaker itself, since I already have the impulse response and DI and everything. And that was just my main concern, was how can I support the basses and not step over them? How can I blend in with them, that I sound like I'm a part of them? And if I want to be in the cello side, or if I want to be in the viola side, or in the acoustic bass side. And a lot of times I made a lot of octave decisions in the music. I would look at all of their parts, and I would say, in this point, we only have maybe 8 violas on stage. Why don't I take that voice and I support it in an octave higher or lower, just to give the harmonic presence? And I would play it very soft, that nobody would even really notice, why is he playing there, or what is he playing there? In reality, I'm just doubling things in octaves to give them subharmonics. And this is one of the things that bass players need to understand, your subharmonic role in the bigger picture. And so I was able to do that in the orchestra, and everybody was very, very happy with that result.
It's an incredible attention to detail, Snow. It really is, man. I to go, first of all, to use a parametric EQ to make sure that you're not treading on the attack of the bow, and that the attack of a bow can change depending on what resin you're using. So that yes. The frequencies every night, you're looking for that, but then to turn around and actually consult the score and go through and compare and contrast. Wow, that really is a beautiful thing, to give that much care and attention to it, and that kind of shows why you're in the seat you're in. A lot of us guys, I would just turn up, plug in, off I go. But it's a wonderful awareness that I think some guys, basically, maybe if they weren't so involved with orchestrations, which is something that obviously you're very deep in, wouldn't even have given a second thought to. That have been, dare I say, not not such a harsh word, but a little bit more selfish on stage. This is the sound I want. This is how I want my bass to sound. You're not. You're definitely looking at the entire arrangement and going, okay, here's where I need to sit. How do I put myself there, as opposed to moving around?
And I had a few times Snow Owl fans that came to the concerts that I would talk to afterwards, and they were like, "Oh, where was your solo?" Or where, I didn't hear you soloing, or I didn't hear you this and this and that. And my answer to them was always, the whole concert is a solo.
Yeah.
The whole I said, you should have paid more attention, and if you would have heard the elements that I was supporting, then you would understand the whole bass solo concept of, this is why I'm a soloist. I'm one of the 9 soloists in the group. It's just the concept of a solo doesn't have to be you're in front and you're the only one blowing licks. No, the solo is when you achieve with 90 people on stage to be one.
Yeah, incredible, absolutely incredible. The job of the role that you take with Zimmer, with those orchestrations, is going to be very different sonically to life in the studio. How does your setup evolve? I mean, let's talk. If you talk to me, I know signal changes will change in every single essence, but there's always go-to equipment that you will try and tailor to get your sound to be able, because you can work with that tool, so you know it's going to respond in the correct way to give you the product you need. When in the studio, how does your setup change and augment to deal with the circumstances?
I'll try to talk about, let's see, like we're finishing up some beautiful extra things for the Dune soundtrack right now. So I'll use that as an example.
Please.
I would receive a piece of music which it's kind of like a bass brigade.
Okay.
Where I am playing the bowed bass, the electric bowed bass, which is the Ibanez UB804.
Yeah. That
I use in many layers. And then there's distorted basses and then regular basses. So there's, in this particular scenario, which I can't wait for all of you to hear, Hans has outdone himself on this score. It's my favorite so far. Harmonics, big challenge, because it's so many bass layers. Phasing can be a huge problem if you're using microphones and amps, and you really got to know your studio chops have to be on point. So I have to really commend and mention a few tools that I use always that work tremendously well. And that is SE Electronics, the microphones from SE Electronics. When I'm doing the bowed stuff, I use an RN17 just for a piezo effect. Yeah. This is the condenser lipstick mic, and I get that really close to the neck, and that's getting my attack, that's getting my bowing, because if there's going to be 7 or 20 layers of that, there's going to be extra harmonics that are going to come out, and you need to capture that. Otherwise, I won't sound like 12 people in one thing. So I use the dark glass has been not only the actual pedals, they've been amazing. Sometimes I switch between Aguilar and dark glass amplifiers, but I have to put the amplifiers in another room and run a cable because the fan noise gets into the microphones.
Right. Yeah.
And that's a typical thing that nobody realized. Live on stage, nobody hears the fan noise. And then I have my studio, as you see, it's treated, and it's you hear every single noise. And then all this fan noise was going into the mics. That drove me insane. So I had to run the amplifiers into another room. And the neural DSP, the parallax software, unbelievable parameters for high drive and mid drive distortions. Saturations, you've got your decapitator, that's a classic. The plugins that you should be using, Saturn, Fab Filter, all all of these things, I've designed multiple templates that correspond to the microphones, correspond to the multiple bass layers, because it's usually spread out over 3 or 4 octaves. So I have my saturation and my mid-range plugins that are prepared for just the low B string stuff. Then there's the upper stuff, and then there's the really high stuff. Everything is customized to ridiculous detail, so that it all comes through and it sounds like one beast in one thing. So learning microphones, learning plugins, Rupert Neve equipment. I mean, the preamps from Rupert Neve. That man was, you know, what would be music without Rupert Neve? Rest in peace. What a beautiful soul. He was a friend. He supported my career tremendously. So I use his DI, the Rupert Neve DI, stereo or single. I use the preamps, the 511s, the diode compressor, the 535s. And I know it's getting too technical or geeky or whatever, but if you want to succeed, you have to pursue excellence at every level. And I refuse to be, what would be the word, barricaded or denied what I can do due to the lack of an engineer's knowledge. And at the end of the day, not every engineer is a bass player. There's few, and when they're there, it's great. We get along right away. But most of them are thinking of drums and vocals. They're not thinking of low mids and down below, and maybe some get only the really, really great engineers. Then they know how to talk with me. And so I upped my game. I learned as much as I could, so I don't have to have this threat of somebody destroying the performance. And this is for both live and for all the remote studio work that I do.
You spoke about Neve's DIs, which we both have a love affair for. I absolutely adore them. The thing about Neve's DIs is the low response. I mean, is it, I can't think, was it, I want to say 40 hertz, or what does it go down to? I can't remember what it was now.
18.
Yes, it's crazy. Now,
18. and on top 23K.
So this is something that a lot of working bass players, you know, let's consult the masses, or even just people that aren't as in depth. I'm a little bit more rudimentary than that, Snow. I'm not going to just say, yeah, I use all that. I don't. I use Kahn valve DIs, which I love. Abid Khan designed the original SVT DI, so it gives you a very rich valve saturation and compression without having a big old amp, you know, valve amp. So if the gig calls for that, basically. Victor Wooten spoke about this in some depth. He was quite passionate about this in a previous interview that we just did. And he said about how a lot of people now don't realise, because they say they're listening to music on mobile devices with headphones in and stuff like that, that's how the general public would you know just consume music. They don't realise how many frequencies have been taken off of the music, how much richness has been removed. So when you listen to something like an MP3, you're basically receiving a snippet of everything that was originally there.
Yeah.
And when you change to use said aforementioned comments, Rupert's, like I said, the Neve DI is a masterpiece, but all of a sudden you're working in a full range idiom. That the sonic spectrum is huge.
Yes.
And there's so many more overtones and so much more richness from your bass that you never even knew it could do, because you only ever heard that much.
Exactly.
It's a wise decision, is it not, for even just a rudimental guy on the street who wants to make his sound better, just to upgrade his DI?
Yes, upgrade the DI, and even if you don't want to be that technical about it, and I understand, I really do. You have to have a real love for this what is it? Tiring process of checking out all the stuff. I get it. But as far as if you are willing to lug, all your stuff, all your equipment, your speakers and your amp, and you go to a stage and you go to a venue, I guess my advice to everybody would be, think of each venue as an amplifier. Put that in your head. Each venue has different acoustic, different spots where there's going to be your bass frequencies that you love at home are going to sound terrible in. So why would you want to go through that, ruin that beauty of that feeling that you have? And just take a little bit of extra time to really find out, does your amp really give you the wattage that the speaker needs to pump out those notes? That basic alone, will open your mind completely, and you'll realize, oh my God. And then the DI, yes, take a reliable DI that won't have any grounding noise. I mean, that's also a nightmare. Your pickups, your single coils can make a terrible. You have this beautiful, soft, quiet moment in a ballad. The singer's going up to the stage, and you hear from the bass player because he didn't ground, and it just kills the moment. And it'll go through the PA, or if the engineers might not notice it. So you understand what I'm saying?
I'm just picturing this loving moment of a vocalist cupping.
Yeah. You hear that beautifully out of tune G frequency that is my nemesis. My nemesis.
Which perfectly produces a flat 5 interval between the melody line and
exactly. And then subconsciously influences the singer to sing out of tune.
Oh, okay. Let's stop before we
on and on.
Actually, before we talk, because I want to talk to you about Hush, and that's going to be something I do really want to focus on. But just as a quick side on that, you mentioned there about how much the room changes the sound. Now, if I may add something, and it's lovely, I was fortunate enough to record at Sun Studios in Memphis a few years back, which was, for the guys that are unaware, that's Sam Phillips's old studio, which was discovery for Elvis. That's where Elvis and Bill Black and all those guys were put together, and prior to his years at RCA at Victor. And I turned up, and the studio at one point in its life was a car repair garage. So it's tiled. So you get an awful lot of reflection, although it's got a curved ceiling to deflect sound waves, it's still tiled, so you get a lot of reverb and stuff like that. Now, I walked around the room, and as I walked around the room, there was a dramatic, even in the same room, if I was near a window, if I was near a door, if I was near haberdashery of any sort, the sound changed massively. And when you're using open microphones, obviously that's what gets caught. But what was a lovely moment is that I was going around banging my foot on the floor like a madman, and I found this spot, and I went, I like that.
Beautiful.
Kush Curry, who was the engineer, I said, can we put the amp here and mic it from here, please? And he said, of course, yeah, no worries. And he laughed to himself, and I said, and he kept laughing. I said, what? He goes, I'll tell you later. So we played the recording, and it was for a great piece of music, and I did some solo stuff, had some studio time. It's nice, doesn't matter. But at the end of the studio, Kush came up to me, and he said, Phil, I want to show you something. I said, okay. And he lifted my bass amp, and on the floor where the tiles met, there was a divot. He said, you know what that is? I said, no, it looks like a hole in the grouting. He said, no, that was the hole that was put there by Bill Black's double bass pin. 60 years ago, Bill Black did exactly the same thing.
Exactly.
And found a spot, and he went, that's it. And it was the exact same spot where I wanted to put I had this lovely sort of, that's a nice feeling.
Love story. And we as bass players, we are able to hear frequencies, at such low ranges and feel them, and we want to pursue them. And one thing that I do, for example, which scares everybody every time, but I don't care, I do it anyway, is I love the looper. I make a loop, and I leave the stage, and I go to the front of the house, and I listen, and I walk around the room as the looper, and I ask the band to play with the looper. And I make sure, hey, you guys all get your sound check. You all get your beautiful sound. I have to have my sound check too. And even if some guys get annoyed with it, I don't care. I say, I put on the looper. When do I hear front of house? I'm behind the speakers all the time. So I'll never forget how many engineers, how paranoid they get when I put on the looper and I walk out towards the mixing desk.
Wow.
They're like, what are you doing here? I said, well, I'm listening.
That is a use for a loop station that I don't think I've
That
heard
is
yet.
that's another tip there for you guys.
Wow, that's a great idea. I saw Steve Lawson, lovely fretless player. He was talking about using a loop station to check his intonation. So he would play a scale, loop it, and then not get the chorus effect. And I thought that was a lovely use. There we have it. Another employment platform for a loop station. So that's good. Studio, we talked about DIs, we've talked about that legacy, we talked about working with Hans Zimmer, which I'm insanely jealous of, because that's a gig. You did a beautiful animation video which went with Hush, which you did recently. Now, that's a unique song, which also has an awful lot of frequencies and different perspectives that need to be taken into account. Why don't you introduce the song to the viewers, tell us about the composition?
Well, it's the first track on the Red Road album, which is the part of the trilogy of the Colors trilogy that I've been doing. And I was a bit kind of fed up with all the people that every time I had a 6-string bass around my neck, they said to me, well, why don't you play a guitar? And I found that, just so demeaning and insulting that every time they saw that, without ever just considering what the instrument can do, or vice versa. The first 7-string guitar, the violão from Brazilian choro, that has an extra low A, and then how much heavy metal music are they all tuning lower and lower and lower to the bass range? So it's like, it was this thing of this personal wish for me to say to all the people who are always threatening us 6-string players, like, be a guitar. And I said, okay, then I'm going to do a whole song where I do take the role of the guitar without being a guitarist. Okay. And there's like 12 layers of basses and in this composition. Also the soloing stuff, the lead tracks, the rhythm tracks, the distortion tracks, everything is all basses. And it's just a way for me to say, open up your mind. This is what you can do with a 6-string bass guitar. And let's celebrate it. Let's not have this argument about it. What can you learn from this, and what can I learn from you? Instead of having some argument about how many strings you have. I mean, if you look at a 12-string guitar, or you look at look at the Baroque instruments and how many strings some of them had, what does it matter? There's no reason to have any form of division if it's an individual form or tool of expression. It should just be a point of reference, of reflection and celebration between colleagues. So that's the reason for that track.
It's something that I'm a little bit bemused that it's even part of the bass world today. I mean, the bass is still a very relatively new instrument. It's still a young instrument in its infancy. When you compare it to cellos and double basses and harpsichords and things like this, they go back hundreds of years. But there's bass players. God, I can just roll off the top of my head. Not modern bass players, but people that are still active. But Anthony Jackson, right back in '81, which a lot of the I specify that year just for devil's advocate, because I've heard a lot of people, but it seems to be a different generation that are saying, oh yeah, using it just because I use a 5. I use a 5. I like the low B. That's fine. And also I do a lot of reading, and the score often notates that I have to play a low 5, so I have to be able to play it. When I worked with T.M. Stevens said how grateful he was for when that really got developed in the 80s, because without it, the bass guitar was not, dare I say, endangered, but we couldn't keep up with symphony more. So TM actually talked from his career. He was going, no, God, the best thing that ever happened to the bass guitar is it went to 5-string. at the same period in the same hand, Anthony Jackson was already telling us all about six-string basses.
Exactly.
And I will stand shoulder to shoulder with anybody and say that one of the greatest bass players that's ever walked this planet is Anthony Jackson. So,
Yes.
you know, we need to learn from people and embrace evolution, really. And that's
The contrabass guitar, you know, and I'm a purist about it. With Anthony's vision of the instrument, is to cover the range of all the bass clef instruments in one. That was the intention. If the high E from a cello to the low A of an organ or an extended piano. So we are playing our range. It's the bass clef range. And I also think of, if we talk about orchestral music, why does a trombone have an F attachment to go lower? Why is there an F tuba and there's a B flat tuba? Why is there a cornet and a trumpet and a flugelhorn? You see that it's all about ranges. But if you had an instrument that could, you know, this is why the euphonium exists. This is between a tuba and a trombone. You see that these are problems that we found solutions thanks to innovation. That's why I believe we should welcome it and celebrate it.
Yeah, absolutely. And we forget the timeline. I mean, Carol Kay will speak very openly and say, you know, she was a session guitarist. We've seen her on, you know, Richie Valance and La Bamba and stuff like that playing guitar. The electric bass, a la the Fender, the Precision when it came out, was made for studio musicians. It was made for guitarists to double as bassists. You know, get paid twice for the same session, one person. The double bassists were purists. They didn't like the instrument. So, you know, and it's very well recorded in history that people are like, oh, that's not a bass, that's a recording thing. So if we confronted it back then, I don't see how anything's changed now. So it's all good. The actual recording of Hush, the albums are coming up. Very excited. The trilogy's great, but Hush itself, how did you go about layering so many instruments because it's not only just one bass, it's one mind. Snow, and that's something that how do you actually hear the composition? Do you see a finished product, or do you hear one melody line and then you start to grow the harmony from there or from down? What's your general process for you? Is there
Well, I hope when the interview comes out, we can put a link to the song, so the listeners can hear it for themselves. There's also an element of lyrics. I wrote lyrics, so there's vocal, and to even just immediately think, okay, there's a vocalist here, so all these basses can't step on him. That's the first challenge already by itself. There's drums in the song. It's drums, vocal, keyboards, and cymbalom, Russian cymbalom. The dulcimer, I guess, is what you would call it. And all of these instruments have string sounding elements that would cancel out or mask all the layers from bass. So what I had to do to make this successful was find a tuning that the harmonic series was sparse enough that I could do these layers. So it started with how I would tune it, and I tuned every single drum. I selected all the cymbals, the hi-hats, everything in a frequency spectrum, so that when it came time to put in all those bass layers, none of that would step on what I'm trying to do. So I had to tune the cymbalom, I had to tune the cymbals, I had to tune the drums, I had to, the vocalist, I made him sing in a way that was always a counterpoint to the main riff bass line. So nobody stepped on each other. And when you hear this circular motion that is happening between all the layers, and you can hear every single thing, is because a tremendous amount of work to detail was involved. And it involved basically harmonics and equalizing them.
Wow. There's a lesson there that, if I may, I'd love to just extract. With the entire With Bass in Mind alumni, doesn't matter what bass line or what vocabulary they learn with me, I dictate that they must always learn the melody. So it doesn't matter if they're playing a Miles Davis song, a Herbie Hancock song, a Wayne Shorter song, a Horace Silver piece, contemporary. I always make them learn the melody. And the reason I do that is so, and you said it beautifully, you don't tread on the melody's toes.
No, no, exactly. And we have these amazing, phones that have these incredible tuners or decibel readers that you can just stand in front of a drum set and tell the drummer, hey, could you play each drum and then find out which tuning it is? Could you play each cymbal? And then if I make them play the cymbals, if I haven't picked them myself already, but if it's somebody I don't know, I said, would you mind playing your crash? Would you mind playing your ride? If I'm walking bass with a ride cymbal, which is ringing all the time, then I'm going to lose how much of my attack, how much of my sound, and I'll say, oh, okay, so this ride is the lower, ring is at 800, and then your upper attack is, as 4.2 or whatever. So that's exactly the frequency that I would take out of my bass, and then I would add one next to it so that I come out the mix.
I'm in awe, Snow. I really am. I love the attention to detail, and it's to you it's a day-to-day job where you just go, this is how I operate. For me, it's mind blowing. I really, and I'm not ignorant to these things. I'm not, I don't just.
Of course not.
It's fine, but that level of detail in frequency response in a composition is incredible, absolutely magnificent.
But in live situation too, how many bass players suffer? They're my sound is not right tonight. Well, you might have to investigate what is masking your sound from other instruments, so that everybody has a fantastic performance. You should never concede.
Juan, can I first of all, on behalf of everybody with Bass in Mind, thank you for your time this morning. What a lovely insight. This gentleman, we've had a lovely friendship for a number of years now. Long may it continue. I was blown away when Music Radar voted you Bassist of the Year in 2019. I was unbelievably in awe when I heard the Dune trailer, and now very recently to read that the Hollywood Music and Media Awards have acknowledged such a wonderful composition. Congratulations, Snow, and
Thank
congratulations, Hans, because I'm sure, knowing what Hans Zimmer's like, he'll probably watch this at some point and have a little look, but maybe say now, congratulations. Long may your relationship continue. Long may the career be fruitful. Guys, this lovely gentleman is Snow Owl. I'm Phil Mann. This is With Bass in Mind in conversation with, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, guys.
Take care, everybody. God bless.